Let's be real. Watching Stranger Things feels like having cinematic deja vu. You're constantly pointing at the screen going,
Whoa, whoa. Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
It wears its influences so proudly you have to ask, is this a tribute or a straight up heist? The Duffer Brothers basically planned a raid on the 1980s pop culture vault and took everything that wasn't nailed down. A telekinetic girl escaping a secret lab? Well, that's E.T. mashed up with Firestarter. A tight-knit crew of nerdy kids on bikes chasing danger? Well, that sounds a lot like Goonies to me. A monster that hunts from the shadows, picking off its victims one by one. That has the fingerprints of Alien all over it. On paper, the show sounds like a Frankenstein's monster, stitched together from stories we already know by heart. So why did it become one of the most beloved, biggest shows on the planet? How did a series that borrows so much feel so incredibly fresh, thrilling, and emotionally real? Today, we're cracking the code on the perfect crime. We're exploring the master plan for how the Duffer Brothers didn't just copy the 80s, they reverse engineered its soul. They used a brilliant, multi-step heist that turned a pile of familiar parts into something that stands on its own. So how did they pull off this heist? The first step was to steal the blueprint. They built their entire world on the foundation of Steven Spielberg's storytelling. This wasn't just about copying his shots. It was about tapping into a filmmaking language that is synonymous with childhood wonder, giving them an instant emotional shortcut straight into our hearts. Spielberg's stories are often about ordinary kids in sleepy suburbs who stumble into extraordinary circumstances. The Duffer Brothers took that exact narrative blueprint, but gave it a terrifying twist. In a Spielberg movie, kids on bikes represent freedom and adventure. Just think about E.T. and that moment that the bike takes off the ground and passes in front of the moon. In Stranger Things, those same kind of kids on bikes are pedaling instead for their lives, racing toward a monster from another dimension to save their friend. The show repurposes that familiar Spielbergian sense of adventure and injects it with a dose of pure horror. The other part of the blueprint that they steal is the friendship dynamics that also mimics that of the Goonies. At first, the party feels like a carbon copy. Let's look at them side by side. Mike is the determined leader. Mikey. Lucas is the skeptical realist. Mouth. Dustin is the goofy, gadget-loving comic relief. Data. It's a formula we know and love. But then the Duffers pull a classic bait and switch. The kids aren't hunting for pirate treasure. They're on a desperate search for a friend who's been dragged into a horrific alternate reality. Our nostalgia for a fun adventure is used as a Trojan horse, and that Trojan horse is there to deliver us to much darker themes of grief, loss, and the terrifying realization that the world isn't safe at all. If Steven Spielberg and Richard Donner provided the blueprint, the next step in this heist was to give the story a dark, twisted soul. For that, they turned to the master of horror and stole his narrative playbook. King's signature move is revealing the unspeakable evil lurking beneath the idyllic surface of a small town America, and showing that the only thing powerful enough to defeat it is the unbreakable bond of friendship. 11 feels like she walks straight out of a Stephen King novel. The trickle of blood from her nose is a direct visual nod to Charlie McGee in Firestarter, the telltale sign of a girl with a terrifying, uncontrollable power. Her telekinetic fury is a clear echo of Carrie White's tragic prom night revenge. But this is where the genius comes in. King's superpowered girls are often cautionary tales, destined for tragedy. The Duffer Brothers flip that script. Eleven's story isn't about revenge, it's a journey for hope. She's fighting for a family and a place to belong. The homage pulls you in, but that emotional journey, that is brand new. And the town of Hawkins, Indiana, it's practically a sister city to Stephen King's Derry or Castle Rock, a place where the American dream is just a thin layer of asphalt over a pit of supernatural secrets. The kids themselves are a direct reflection of the Losers Club from It, a pack of outsiders forced to fight a monster that the adults in their lives refuse to see. In Season 4, the Creel House is a chilling homage to The Shining's Overlook Hotel, a classic haunted house used to explore the very real horror of buried family trauma. By stealing from King, The Duffers ensured their monsters were never just monsters. They were metaphors for our deepest human fears. Speaking of fear, the heist now needed its muscle. The Duffer Brothers didn't just invent a monster. They assembled a terrifying arsenal from a greatest hits collection of cinematic horror. Let's go back to that alien reference from before. The Demogorgon is basically a direct descendant of the xenomorph. Its life cycle, its jaw, its leathery eggs, its tendrils, it's a clear nod to the 1979 classic. Even the Upside Down itself, with its floating spores and biological webbing, share its aesthetic of the nightmarish designs of H.R. Geiger. The hive mind intelligence of the Mind Flayer and its ability to infect and assimilate hosts is pulled straight from John Carpenter's paranoid masterpiece, The Thing. As the show evolves, so does the Stolen Arsenal. The fleshy, melting bodies that coalesce into this monstrous spider monster in Season 3 are a tribute to the horror of David Cronenberg and the grotesque practical effects of the Blob. But for the ultimate big bad, Vecna, they stole from the holy trinity of 80s horror villains: Freddy Krueger, Pinhead, Pennywise. Vecna is a sentient, calculating monster who stalks his victims by invading their minds and preying on their past trauma, a method lifted directly from A Nightmare on Elm Street. His very design, a disfigured human form entangled with tendrils of another dimension, has the chilling, otherworldly aesthetic of the Cenobites from Hellraiser. And his ability to feed on fear and suffering is a clear echo of Stephen King's Pennywise. The monsters aren't just straight up stolen, but they're in a way mixed and curated, combining the predatory stalking of the alien, the parasitic paranoia of the Thing, and the psychological terror of Freddy Krueger into one terrifying package. With a world, a plan, and an arsenal, all inspired by some of the great movies of the 80s, the next move was to create a diversion to make the whole impossible scheme work. The Duffer Brothers didn't just sprinkle in 80s references like set dressing. They cleverly wove genre tropes and pop culture directly into the plot as the perfect misdirection. Think about the Cold War paranoia.
It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It is such a big explosion
that basically suffocates the entire show. The shadowy government labs, the unethical scientists, the looming threat of Russian spies. That's all lifted from plots of films like Red Dawn and War Games. But it's not just the retro flavor. In Stranger Things, the Cold War becomes the perfect, believable excuse for the supernatural. Is a secret government agency accidentally opening a portal to another dimension insane? Well, yeah, but what if it's happening inside a lab where everyone believes they're fighting a clandestine war against the Soviets? Suddenly, it feels just plausible enough. The paranoia of the area is the cover-up story for the heist. The pop culture of the time is also a critical storytelling tool. When the boys dress up as Ghostbusters for Halloween, oh, come on, how much more of a reference can we have? It's not just a cute reference. It's dramatic irony, foreshadowing their real-life jobs as paranormal exterminators. Those costumes stop being funny when they're trying to use a homemade ghost trap on a very real demo dog. Then you have Eddie Munson. His entire tragic story is born from the real-world Satanic Panic of the 1980s, when society was terrified that things like Dungeons & Dragons and heavy metal were gateways to evil. Eddie's love for D&D isn't just a character quirk. It's the very thing the town uses as a reason to hunt him down, blaming him for Vecna's murders. The references aren't lazy. They're the engine that drives the entire plot. All right, this brings us to the final, most critical step of the heist. The twist that elevates the show from just a clever remix to something truly special. After borrowing all these famous elements, the Duffer Brothers used them to build something priceless: the original emotional journeys of their characters. When you really think about it, the true prize of Stranger Things isn't the Demogorgon or the Mind Flayer. It's the characters that we follow through all these seasons leading up to the finale. 11 may begin as a nod to E.T. and Firestarter, but her journey from a traumatized, mostly silent lab rat into a complex young woman navigating friendship, love, and heartbreak is entirely her own. Her fight to save the world is almost secondary to her much more personal struggle to simply have a normal life. The same goes for everyone else. The boys' friendship is tested and forged in fire, evolving from a simple playground bond into a battle-hardened brotherhood. But the ultimate proof, one of my favorite characters, and maybe yours as well, is Steve Harrington. He starts season 1 as a walking, hairsprayed 80s cliche, the arrogant jock who would be the bad guy in almost any John Hughes movie. His transformation into the group's exhausted, battle-wielding babysitter, or mom, is one of the most beloved and unexpected character arcs in television. There is no 80s movie where the popular jerk becomes the heroic guardian of the nerds.
This is what I'm talking about.
That is 100% Stranger Things. And that's the real secret. The 80s nostalgia is the hook, the inspiration. It's the stage that feels warm and it feels familiar to us. But the emotional drama unfolding on that stage and all the mixed elements that come together to work in a unique combination, that's where it gets completely fresh. The familiar gets you in the door, but its original, powerfully written characters are the ones that make you stay. So to answer our original question, is Stranger Things a cinematic heist? Without a doubt. It lovingly stole from Spielberg, Stephen King, Carpenter, and a whole library of 80s pop culture. But the genius of the Duffer Brothers is that they weren't just thieves in this, they were architects. Most importantly, they filled that world with characters whose emotional lives were profoundly and beautifully new. And it's in that combination and inspiration that it truly does something special. They understood that homage without heart is just empty. By blending the familiar with the original, the referential with the emotional, they turned what could have been a simple tribute into a global phenomenon. So once again, I'm Brian, this is Plotluck, and if you've ever loved a story, felt let down by one, or dreamed of telling your own, pull up a chair, hit subscribe, and let's stir the plot together. That's a wrap.